I'm Chauncey Navarro. This is the Inspired Word, and we've been going through the book of the Revelation of Jesus. We're coming down to that final stretch. We're in chapter 21 right now. So we have 21 and 22 left to do. And so as we continue on in chapter 21, verse 1 says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." Once again, we're touching on this bride. And basically, the New Jerusalem is called this bride. We make up this New Jerusalem. "Then I saw the new heaven and the new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." Now, basically, I touched on the ancient traditional Jewish wedding before, because this, dealing with the bride, and that was back in chapter 19. And this is the bride that it's talking about, where Jesus is the bridegroom and we are the bride that makes this up. When we continue on in verse 3, it says, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. Also he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. And the one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all the liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." Now, I find it interesting, too, on verse 8 here, where he starts out with the cowardly. The first that come up is the cowardly, then the faithless. And it goes on from there. That's intriguing when you look at, in terms of the order, in terms of who's thrown into the lake of fire. Going back a little bit farther, too, he says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I touched on this at the beginning in terms in the Hebrew. This would be the Aleph Tav. Now, if you're going to look at the Paleo-Hebrew hieroglyphic type that was there, Alexander the Great, when he's translated the Septuagint, he's the one that changed the Hebrew language from a Paleo-Hebrew language into an alphabet. But prior to that, you had it. Well, if you went by the Paleo-Hebrew, the Aleph Tav, the Aleph would be, strength, leader, ox, right? So it'd be the leader of the Tav is a cross, and it meant covenant. So it'd be the leader of the covenant that it's talking about in there. Now, in Psalm 46:6, it goes on to say, There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her, and she shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, and the earth melts. In Isaiah 66:22-24, he says, For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your offspring and your name remain. From the new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares the Lord. And they shall go out and look on the dead bodies of the men who have rebelled against me. For their worm shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. Now, let me touch on that for just a second here. I can't just let that go by without making a comment here. So Isaiah 66 is referring to this new heaven and new earth that Revelation's talking about in there. And it's talking about coming in to worship God in the New Jerusalem on all the new moons. So we're still running on the Jewish calendar. And from Sabbath to Sabbath, which is Saturday to Saturday. God is, one of his names is Yahweh Shavayot. I am sevenths. Sabbath, Shabbat is the Hebrew word for seven. Sabbath is seventh. And they shall go out and look on the dead bodies of men. Now you're going to remember in the second resurrection, the dead, in the first resurrection, those that were believers got their immortal bodies. In the second resurrection, we've got non-believers in this group that are not written in the book of life, that are resurrected, so they're getting their immortal bodies here, but thrown into the lake of fire. So they have immortal bodies. They're not going to die. Their worm never dies. They continue to burn and burn for eternity because they're immortal. That's one of the downsides of immortality is immortal suffering. Now going on to verse 9, it says, Then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues, and he spoke with me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and he showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like jasper, like clear crystal. And it had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels. And on the gates the name of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. And on the east 3 gates, and on the north 3 gates, and on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Now I want to do a quick New Testament reference, jump back to Hebrews 11:10. It says, For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. That's talking about this New Jerusalem, the bride, that he built here. We make up this New Jerusalem, and he built us up in the image of his Son. In Isaiah, in the Old Testament, chapter 54, verse 11 to 13, he says, O afflicted one, storm-tossed and not comforted, behold, I will set your stones in antimony, and I will lay your foundations with sapphires, and I will make your pinnacles of agate, and your gates of carbuncle, and all your walls of precious stones, and all your children shall be taught by the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. And if you recall back earlier in Revelation, when we were in the letters to the churches, the church of Philadelphia, he says, I will make you pillars in the New Jerusalem. See, we make up this New Jerusalem. We are the stones that build this up, just as Jesus is the cornerstone, the foundation of this New Jerusalem. In chapter 21, verse 15, he goes on to say, And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. And the city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width. And he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. That's 1,380 miles. And its length and its width and its height are equal. So basically we're talking about a cube here that's 1,380 miles high, long, and wide. Wow. When I did my New Jerusalem drawing, the one I'm using on the chart right here on it, where I'm showing the different jewels for the foundations. If you're wondering the design and the look of that New Jerusalem, I actually used the symbol for a tetrachus, which is from the when they do physics and stuff, and this is basically a 4-dimensional cube. For in terms of the way it's tried to be expressed and laid out. In chapter 21, verse 17, he goes on to say, he also measured its walls 144 cubits. That's 212 feet 7 inches and 3/4 by human measurement, which is also an angel's measurement. So he's saying here that the measurement's the same for human and angel. And the wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold like clear glass. And jasper, you get kind of that amber yellow type color. And the gold, clear like glass, once again is kind of that, once again you get that, you're getting a gold color, but it's to the point that it's transparent. So purified that there are no impurities left in it. Going on in verse 19, he goes on to say, the foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. So he ends with purple, the royal color. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the streets of the city were pure gold like transparent glass. Now, I got to stop and talk about the pearly gates here, because people that aren't Jewish, wouldn't recognize the fact that, pearls come from a shellfish. Shellfish are unclean. They're not kosher, right? If you look at it, Jews value diamonds. Jews value gold. Pearls are not among these things per se. And yet, we have something unclean here that's used for the gates of the temple that's considered precious. And to me, I look at this, I still see this as this picture of the unclean Gentiles who've been made clean through the blood of the Lamb. There's this entrance, this gate in here to it for these 12 tribes of Israel. To me, that's almost kind of a Gentile type reference on it. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And if you recall, Jesus said, destroy this temple and I'll raise it in 3 days. And the city has no need of a sun or a moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. Now, the glory of God is shining from the Lamb, from the New Jerusalem, so bright that there's no need for a sun or a moon. It literally lights up the entire world. Now, does that mean there is no moon? I don't necessarily know that means there's no moon, because he talks about coming to worship at the New Jerusalem from new moon to new moon. But I do believe that what it is that it basically, the light is not coming from the moon. The light is coming from the Messiah who lights up the world, who's the light of the world. Now, you go on in verse 24 to say, by its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. So where in the Millennium Kingdom, the gates were shut and they were opened on Sabbath, here in the New Jerusalem, they're always open. They're never shut. And we go on in verse 26 to say, and they will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will ever enter it, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Anyway, that's a good note to stop on. I'm Chauncey Navarro. I hope to see you back here as we finish the last chapter in our run through the book of the Revelation of Jesus. I'll see you back here.